Commander Sarah Chen stood at the edge of the transport platform, watching the sleek shuttles carry diplomats and dignitaries away from the signing ceremony. The Treaty of Proxima Centauri was now official. After 8 brutal years, the human-Kethvar conflict had finally ended. The massive alien dreadnoughts that had once darkened Earth's skies were now retreating to their home systems, their hulls scarred by human plasma fire. Sarah's cybernetic arm whirred softly as she adjusted her dress uniform. The prosthetic was a reminder of the Battle of Europa Station, where she had lost half her squadron and nearly her life defending the mining colonies. That day she had proven that human pilots could outmaneuver Kethvar interceptors through sheer determination and tactical creativity. The aliens had superior technology, but humans had something they couldn't replicate: the willingness to take impossible risks when everything was on the line. The war had changed everything. Earth's population had dropped by nearly 1 billion, but those who survived were harder, smarter, and more united than ever before. The Terran Defense Force had become humanity's greatest achievement, turning ordinary people into warriors who could stand against an advanced alien civilization. Sarah had been one of the best, earning the nickname Ghostwing for her ability to appear where the enemy least expected. Now, as she looked at her discharge papers, Sarah felt lost. The military had been her life for 12 years. She understood plasma cannons and shield harmonics, tactical formations and supply lines. But what did a war hero do when there was no more war to fight? The answer came from an unexpected source. Dr. Marcus Webb, the elderly director of the Mars Colonial Academy, approached her with a proposal that seemed impossible. The academy was expanding its curriculum to include xenobiology and interspecies relations. With the peace treaty opening new possibilities for contact with other alien civilizations, humanity needed educators who understood both human potential and alien mindsets. "You fought them, Commander," Dr. Webb explained as they walked through the Academy's gleaming corridors. "You understand how they think, how they adapt. But more importantly, you understand what makes humans special. We need someone who can teach our next generation not just facts about alien species, but how to face the unknown with confidence." Sarah was skeptical. She had never taught anyone except green recruits in combat situations. The idea of standing in front of a classroom full of eager young students seemed more terrifying than facing a Kethvar battlecruiser. But Dr. Webb pressed on, showing her the new facilities being constructed specifically for the xenobiology program. The laboratories contained artifacts captured during the war, including intact Kethvar neural interfaces and atmospheric processors. The student body would be unique as well. These weren't ordinary colonists seeking basic education. They were the children of war veterans, young people who had grown up during the conflict and witnessed humanity's greatest triumph. Many had lost parents in the fighting, but instead of being broken by the experience, they had become more determined to understand the universe beyond Earth. Sarah's first meeting with the curriculum committee was a disaster. The other professors were brilliant academics who spoke in complex theories about xenopsychology and interstellar diplomacy. They discussed the Kethvar as if they were subjects in a research paper, not the ruthless enemies who had bombarded civilian targets and enslaved entire colonies. When Sarah tried to explain the reality of first contact through combat, they looked at her like she was a barbarian. "The war is over, Commander," said Professor Helena Voss, the head of theoretical xenobiology. "We must move beyond the warrior mentality and embrace peaceful coexistence. Our students need to learn cooperation, not conflict." Sarah's response was quiet but firm. "Cooperation requires understanding, and understanding requires respect. The Kethvar didn't surrender because we were nice to them. They surrendered because we proved we were too dangerous to ignore. Any alien species we encounter in the future will test us the same way. Our students need to know that humanity's strength isn't just our technology or our numbers. It's our refusal to give up even when everything seems hopeless." The committee members exchanged uncomfortable glances. They wanted to hire a war hero for prestige, but they didn't want to deal with the messy realities that hero represented. Sarah realized that her real battle was just beginning. She would have to prove that a soldier could become a teacher, and that the lessons of war could be transformed into tools for peace. That night, Sarah stood in her temporary quarters, looking out at the red landscape of Mars. The planet had been humanity's first major colony, established when Earth still believed it was alone in the universe. Now it would become the training ground for the next phase of human expansion. Somewhere among the students arriving next month were the future explorers, diplomats, and defenders who would carry humanity to the stars. Sarah made her decision. She would take the teaching position, but on her own terms. She would show these young people that humanity's greatest strength wasn't its weapons or its technology, but its ability to adapt, learn, and overcome any challenge. The war had ended, but humanity's real journey was just beginning. Sarah's first day at the Mars Colonial Academy began with a surprise. She had expected a classroom full of nervous teenagers, but instead found herself facing 25 young adults whose eyes held the same hardness she recognized in veteran soldiers. These students had lived through the war, and it showed in their posture, their alertness, and the way they evaluated her as a potential threat before dismissing her as merely another teacher. The youngest was barely 18, a girl named Elena Vasquez whose parents had died defending the Luna shipyards. The oldest was Marcus Thompson, 23, who had spent 4 years as a civilian engineer maintaining defense platforms around Jupiter. They came from every corner of human space, united by their shared experience of growing up during humanity's darkest hour. Sarah had abandoned the standard curriculum prepared by the academic committee. Instead, she placed a captured Kethvar plasma rifle on her desk, its crystalline power core dark and lifeless. The students' attention snapped to the weapon immediately, their casual chatter dying into tense silence. "This rifle," Sarah began, "can punch through a meter of reinforced titanium." The Kethvar warrior who carried it was 7 feet tall, had reflexes twice as fast as any human, and had been trained for combat since birth. By every logical measure, this alien should have been superior to any human soldier. She paused, letting her words sink in. "But I took this weapon from his dead hands after the Battle of Titan Station." A student named David Kim raised his hand tentatively. "Professor Chen, how is that possible?" "I've read the technical specifications. Kethvar warriors are physically superior in every measurable way." Sarah smiled, recognizing the hunger for understanding in the young man's voice. "That's exactly the right question, David. And the answer is what makes humans special in this galaxy. We don't win because we're stronger or faster. We win because we think differently." She activated the classroom's holographic display, showing a tactical recreation of the Titan Station battle. The 3-dimensional battlefield materialized around them, complete with moving ships and weapons fire. The students found themselves standing in the middle of a space battle, watching human fighters dart between massive alien dreadnoughts like insects harassing giants. "The Kethvar planned this battle perfectly," Sarah explained, as the simulation played out. "They had superior numbers, better weapons, and complete control of the high orbital positions. By every military doctrine they understood, they should have won in 6 hours. But they made one critical mistake. They assumed humans would follow logical tactical patterns. The simulation showed the moment when everything changed. Instead of retreating or attempting a conventional defense, the human fleet did something unprecedented. They deliberately crashed damaged ships into the alien formation, using the explosions as cover for boarding actions. Human Marines, equipped with nothing but magnetic boots and plasma cutters, attached themselves to the enemy vessels and began cutting through their hulls. The Kethvar couldn't understand what they were seeing. Sarah continued, "In their culture, warriors preserve their lives to fight another day. The concept of deliberately sacrificing yourself to create an advantage for your comrades was completely alien to them. They hesitated for just 12 minutes trying to process this illogical behavior. That hesitation cost them the battle." Elena Vasquez spoke up from the back row, her voice carrying a slight tremor. "My mother was on one of those ships, the UES Defiance. She stayed behind to manually overload the reactor." The classroom fell silent. Sarah felt the weight of history in that moment, the connection between past sacrifice and future potential. "Your mother understood something that took me years to learn, Elena. Humans don't survive because we're the toughest species in the galaxy. We survive because we're willing to do whatever it takes to protect what matters to us. That's not just a military principle. It's who we are as a species." Marcus Thompson leaned forward in his chair. "But Professor, the war is over now. How does this apply to peaceful contact with other alien civilizations?" Sarah changed the holographic display to show the current state of human space. New trade routes were opening with former enemies, and exploration ships were pushing deeper into unknown sectors. "The same principles apply, Marcus. When we meet new species, they'll test us just like the HFY did. Not necessarily through combat, but they'll probe our resolve, our intelligence, our willingness to stand up for ourselves. If we appear weak or divided, we'll be dismissed or exploited. If we show them the same determination that won the war, we'll earn their respect. She walked among the students, her cybernetic arm catching the light from the holographic display. Your generation will be the first to grow up in a galaxy where humans are known and respected. But that respect was earned through sacrifice, and it will have to be maintained through strength. Not just military strength, but intellectual strength, cultural strength, and the kind of moral courage that says this is who we are, and we won't be changed by anyone. The lesson continued for 3 hours, far longer than the scheduled class time. None of the students seemed to notice. They were hungry for these stories, these explanations of how their world had been shaped by events they had lived through but never fully understood. Sarah found herself energized in a way she hadn't felt since the war ended. These young people weren't just students. They were the future of human civilization. As the class finally ended, Elena Vasquez approached Sarah's desk. "Professor Chen, I want to study xenobiology because I want to understand why my parents had to die. I want to know what makes different species fight, and what makes them stop fighting." Sarah looked at the young woman and saw herself 12 years ago, full of questions and determination. "That's a worthy goal, Elena. But remember, understanding isn't the same as agreeing. The HFY had their reasons for starting the war, just like we had our reasons for finishing it. Your job isn't to judge who was right. Your job is to make sure humanity is ready for whatever comes next." That evening, Sarah sat in her office reviewing the day's events. The academic committee had sent her several pointed messages about following the approved curriculum, but she deleted them without reading past the first few lines. These students needed more than textbook theories about alien psychology. They needed to understand their own heritage, their own strength, and their own responsibility to carry humanity forward. Tomorrow, she would show them captured HFY battle tactics and explain how human unpredictability had turned certain defeat into victory. The day after that, she would discuss the peace negotiations and how human diplomats had leveraged military success into favorable treaty terms. Each lesson would build on the last, creating a foundation of knowledge that went far beyond what any traditional academic program could provide. The war had ended, but Sarah Chen's mission was just beginning. She would forge these young people into scholars and leaders who understood that humanity's place in the galaxy was not a gift, but an achievement that had to be earned anew with each generation. 3 weeks into the semester, Sarah faced her first real crisis. The academic review board had scheduled an unannounced observation of her teaching methods, and Professor Helena Voss arrived with 2 other committee members just as Sarah was beginning her most controversial lesson yet. The classroom had been transformed into a replica of a HFY ship's interior, complete with the strange crystalline control surfaces and low-gravity environmental systems that the aliens preferred. Sarah had spent her own money, purchasing salvaged components from military surplus dealers, creating an immersive experience that no textbook could match. "Today we're going to understand how the HFY think," Sarah announced to her students, ignoring the disapproving looks from the observers. "Not how we think they think, but how they actually process information and make decisions." She gestured to Elena Vasquez and Marcus Thompson. "You two will play the role of HFY ship commanders. Your mission is to capture a human cargo vessel without destroying its contents. Elena, your ship has superior firepower. Marcus, your ship has better speed and maneuverability. Work together to develop a strategy." The students immediately began discussing tactics, their voices taking on the clipped, efficient tone that Sarah recognized from military briefings. Professor Voss shifted uncomfortably in her seat, clearly disturbed by the warlike atmosphere. "This is inappropriate," Voss whispered to her companions. "We're supposed to be teaching peaceful coexistence, not glorifying combat scenarios." Sarah pretended not to hear the criticism and continued with the exercise. As Elena and Marcus developed their strategy, she walked among the other students who were playing the roles of human defenders. "Remember," she told them, "you're outnumbered and outgunned. How do you survive?" David Kim raised his hand. "We could pretend to surrender, then activate hidden weapons when they board us." "Interesting," Sarah replied. "But would that work against the HFY? What do we know about their psychology? The question sparked a heated discussion among the students. They pulled from their readings, their personal experiences during the war, and the tactical analyses that Sarah had been teaching them. Gradually, a complex picture emerged of an alien species that valued honor and straightforward confrontation above cunning and deception. The HFY wouldn't expect a false surrender, concluded Elena. In their culture, surrender is a sacred act. Violating it would be unthinkable. Exactly, Sarah said. And that cultural difference is why the strategy might work once but never twice. The moment we use deception against them, they'll adapt their understanding of human behavior. That's what makes them dangerous opponents and potentially valuable allies. Marcus Thompson frowned thoughtfully. So they're not just alien bodies with alien technology. They're alien minds with completely different moral frameworks. Now you're beginning to understand, Sarah replied. And that understanding is what will keep humanity safe when we encounter new species. We can't assume that what seems logical to us will seem logical to them. The exercise continued for another hour, with students switching roles and exploring different scenarios. By the end of the class, they had developed a deep appreciation for the complexity of interspecies conflict and cooperation. More importantly, they had learned to think beyond human assumptions and consider alternative perspectives. As the students filed out, Professor Voss approached Sarah with barely contained anger. Commander Chen, this kind of military role-playing has no place in an academic environment. You're teaching these young people to think like soldiers, not scholars. Sarah met her gaze steadily. I'm teaching them to think like survivors, Professor Voss. In 20 years, when these students are representing humanity to species we haven't even discovered yet, they'll need to understand that good intentions aren't enough. They'll need to know how to read alien behavior, anticipate alien reactions, and respond to alien threats. But the war is over, Voss protested. We must move beyond this militaristic mindset. The war with the HFY is over, Sarah corrected. But there are thousands of other species in this galaxy, and we don't know anything about most of them. Some will be peaceful, others will see us as potential prey. My students need to be prepared for both possibilities. Dr. Webb, who had remained silent during the exchange, finally spoke up. Professor Voss, I've reviewed Commander Chen's curriculum extensively. Her methods may be unconventional, but her results speak for themselves. Test scores in her xenobiology courses are 30% higher than any other instructor we've had. Voss was not satisfied. Test scores don't matter if we're teaching the wrong lessons. These students should be learning cooperation and understanding, not suspicion and aggression. Sarah felt her patience wearing thin. Professor, with respect, you're making the same mistake that almost cost us Earth. You're assuming that all alien species will share human values about cooperation and peaceful resolution. The HFY didn't attack us because they misunderstood our intentions. They attacked us because they saw weakness and decided to exploit it. The debate continued for another 30 minutes, with other faculty members choosing sides based on their own philosophies about humanity's future in space. Sarah found herself defending not just her teaching methods, but her entire worldview about humanity's place in the galaxy. Finally, Dr. Webb called for a vote on whether Sarah's unconventional method should continue. The result was close, but Sarah's supporters prevailed by a narrow margin. She would be allowed to continue her experimental curriculum for the remainder of the semester, after which her results would be formally evaluated. That evening, Sarah sat in her quarters reviewing student feedback forms. The responses were overwhelmingly positive, but what struck her most were the personal notes that many students had added. Professor Chen showed me that my father's death wasn't meaningless, wrote one student whose parent had died in the Battle of Proxima. He died protecting something bigger than himself, and now I understand what that means. Another wrote, I used to be afraid of aliens because of the war. Now I'm still cautious, but I'm not afraid. Professor Chen taught me that humans can handle whatever the galaxy throws at us. The most moving response came from Elena Vasquez. My mother always told me that knowledge is power, but Professor Chen taught me that the right kind of knowledge is survival. I want to be strong enough to protect the next generation the way my parents protected me. Sarah realized that her battle with the academic establishment was just beginning. There would be more challenges, more critics, and more pressure to conform to traditional educational models. But her students were learning lessons that no textbook could teach. developing skills that would serve humanity for generations to come. The war had taught her that victory wasn't about having the best weapons or the strongest defenses. Victory was about having the will to keep fighting when everyone else wanted to give up. As she prepared for the next day's classes, Sarah knew that her real war was just beginning, and the stakes had never been higher. The breakthrough came during Sarah's 6th week of teaching, but not in the way she had expected. A priority message from Earth's Xenological Research Division arrived during her morning office hours, marked with security classifications that made her stomach tighten. The last time she had seen codes like these, the HFY had been mobilizing their entire fleet for a final assault on the Sol system. Director Amanda Torres appeared on Sarah's secure communication terminal, her face grave with the weight of classified information. "Commander Chen, we have a situation that requires your expertise. 3 days ago, our deep space monitoring stations detected an artificial signal from the Vega system. It's not HFY technology." Sarah felt her pulse quicken. "How do you know it's artificial?" "Mathematical progressions, complex harmonic patterns, deliberate repetition with subtle variations. It's definitely intelligent, and it's definitely trying to communicate. The signal has been getting stronger over the past 72 hours, which suggests the source is moving toward human space." The implications hit Sarah immediately. Humanity's first contact with an unknown alien species would happen within months, possibly weeks. After 8 years of war with the HFY, the galaxy was about to test humanity's diplomatic and strategic abilities with a completely new challenge. "What do you need from me, Director?" Sarah asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. "We need you to prepare a crash course for our contact specialists. Everything you've learned about reading alien behavior, anticipating non-human psychology, and maintaining human interest during negotiations. But more than that, we need you to help us avoid the mistakes we made with the HFY." Sarah was quiet for a long moment, remembering the early days of the HFY conflict. Humanity's first diplomatic overtures had been based on human concepts of fairness and mutual benefit. The aliens had interpreted these gestures as signs of weakness and had responded with increasingly aggressive demands. By the time human leaders realized they were dealing with a fundamentally different moral framework, war had become inevitable. "Director, I'm honored by your confidence, but I'm just a teacher now. Surely your diplomatic corps has learned from the HFY experience." Torres shook her head grimly. "Our diplomats are excellent at negotiating with humans and even with the HFY now that we understand them. But this new species represents a complete unknown. We need someone who understands how to analyze alien behavior from first principles, someone who can teach our people to think beyond human assumptions." The conversation continued for an hour, with Torres outlining the full scope of the challenge. The incoming signals suggested a highly advanced civilization, possibly more technologically sophisticated than either humans or the HFY. Early analysis indicated that the aliens might be trying to establish peaceful contact, but the same analysis could be completely wrong if the new species thought in ways that human linguists couldn't anticipate. "I need 12 of your best people," Sarah finally said. "Linguists, xenobiologists, tactical analysts, and cultural anthropologists. Give me 2 weeks and I'll teach them everything I know about reading alien intentions." "You'll have them," Torres replied. "But Commander, this isn't just about preparing our specialists. If these aliens reach human space and we handle first contact badly, we could be looking at another war. This time against an enemy we know nothing about." After the call ended, Sarah sat in her office staring at the Martian landscape outside her window. The red desert stretched to the horizon, marked by the geometric patterns of human settlements and terraforming projects. In just 50 years, humanity had transformed an alien world into something resembling home. Now they would have to prove they could handle contact with aliens who might be just as adaptable and just as determined. Her afternoon classes took on new urgency. Without revealing the classified information about the incoming signals, Sarah began incorporating lessons about first contact protocols and cultural analysis techniques. Her students sensed the change in her teaching style immediately. Professor Chen asked David Kim during a break between lectures, "You seem different today. More intense. Is everything all right?" Sarah looked at her students and saw the future defenders of human civilization. Elena Vasquez, who had learned to channel her grief into determination. Marcus Thompson, whose engineering background helped him understand both human and alien technology. 23 other young people who had grown up during humanity's greatest trial and emerged stronger rather than broken. "I want you all to imagine something," Sarah said, abandoning her planned lecture on HFY social structures. "Tomorrow we receive a signal from an unknown alien species. It's clearly intelligent, clearly artificial, and clearly directed at human space. You're chosen to be part of the first contact team." "What's the first thing you do?" The students exchanged glances, recognizing the sudden shift from theoretical to practical application. Elena raised her hand tentatively. "Analyze the signal for patterns that might indicate peaceful or hostile intent?" "Good start," Sarah replied. "But what assumptions are you making about how this species communicates intent?" Marcus Thompson frowned thoughtfully. "We're assuming they have concepts of peaceful and hostile intent that we would recognize. But what if their moral framework is completely different from ours in the HFY?" "Exactly." Sarah felt a surge of pride at her students' quick understanding. What if this species considers war to be a form of artistic expression? What if they see peaceful negotiation as a sign of mental illness? What if they communicate primarily through actions rather than words? The discussion that followed was the most intense of the semester. Students drew on everything they had learned about human and HFY psychology, applying those lessons to hypothetical aliens with radically different worldviews. They developed protocols for analyzing alien behavior, strategies for maintaining human interests while remaining open to genuine cooperation, and contingency plans for scenarios ranging from peaceful trade to existential threats. The key, Sarah emphasized as the class period drew to a close, is to remain true to human values while adapting to alien realities. We can't compromise what makes us human, but we also can't impose our perspective on species that might think in completely different ways. Elena Vasquez stayed after class, her expression troubled. "Professor Chen, what if we're not ready? What if we make the same mistakes with a new species that we made with the HFY?" Sarah considered the question carefully. "Elena, the difference between then and now is experience. When we first encountered the HFY, we had no idea what we were dealing with. We made assumptions based on human psychology and paid a terrible price for our ignorance. But we learned from those mistakes and we survived. Your generation has grown up knowing that the universe is full of species that don't think like us. That knowledge is our greatest advantage." That evening, Sarah began preparing for the most important curriculum of her career. In 2 weeks, she would be training the specialists who might determine whether humanity's next first contact led to peace or war. But more importantly, she was already training the young, people who would carry that responsibility for the rest of their lives. The war with the HFY had taught humanity that survival required more than superior weapons or defensive strategies. It required the ability to understand and adapt to threats that couldn't be anticipated through human reasoning alone. As Sarah worked late into the night developing new lesson plans, she knew that humanity's next test was approaching, and this time there would be no room for the naive optimism that had nearly cost them everything 8 years ago. The government specialists arrived at Mars Colonial Academy like a storm front, 12 of Earth's most brilliant minds carrying the weight of humanity's future on their shoulders. Sarah recognized the type immediately. The same focused intensity she had seen in veteran pilots before crucial missions. The same careful alertness that kept people alive when everything depended on making the right decision in seconds. Dr. Elizabeth Harper, the team's chief linguist, had spent 5 years decoding HFY communication patterns. Commander James Morrison brought tactical analysis experience. From the Battle of Wolf 359, Dr. Yuki Tanaka represented the xenobiology division that had first identified the biological differences that made HFY psychology so alien to human understanding. Each specialist was an expert in their field, but Sarah quickly realized they were making the same fundamental mistake that had nearly doomed humanity years earlier. "You're thinking like humans trying to understand aliens," Sarah explained during their first session together. "What you need to do is think like aliens trying to understand humans, then flip that perspective to analyze completely unknown species." The specialists exchanged confused glances. Dr. Harper spoke first. "Professor Chen, I'm not sure I understand the distinction. Isn't the goal to develop accurate models of alien psychology?" Sarah activated the holographic display, showing a tactical recreation of the first diplomatic meeting between humans and HFY representatives. The scene played out like a slow-motion disaster, with each side misinterpreting the other's intentions based on their own cultural assumptions. Watch the body language, Sarah instructed. The human ambassadors are maintaining eye contact, which signals honesty and respect in human culture. But look at the Kethvar reaction. The aliens in the simulation appeared increasingly agitated as the humans continued their direct gaze. What the humans intended as respectful attention, the Kethvar interpreted as a threatening challenge to their authority. The Kethvar delegate is shifting his weight to his rear legs and spreading his claws slightly, Sarah continued. In their body language, this is a defensive posture indicating submission to a superior force. But our ambassadors interpreted it as a sign that the negotiations were going well. Commander Morrison leaned forward in his chair. So both sides thought they were being respectful, but they were actually escalating the tension without realizing it. Exactly. And when the talks broke down, both sides blamed the other for being deliberately aggressive. The war started because we couldn't recognize that our fundamental assumptions about communication were incompatible. Sarah spent the next 3 days dismantling everything the specialists thought they knew about interspecies contact. She showed them recordings of Kethvar prisoners discussing human tactics, revealing thought patterns that were logical, but completely alien to human reasoning. She demonstrated how human concepts like individual sacrifice for group benefit were literally incomprehensible to a species that had evolved as solitary hunters. The incoming signals from the Vega system, Sarah explained on the 4th day, represent our chance to avoid repeating these mistakes. But we can't just apply what we learned about the Kethvar to a completely different species. We need to develop a framework for analyzing any form of alien intelligence. Dr. Tanaka raised a concern that had been bothering her since the beginning of the training. Professor Chen, how do we maintain human interests while remaining open to alien perspectives? The Kethvar took advantage of our initial cooperation attempts. What prevents this new species from doing the same thing? It was the question Sarah had been waiting for. The one that got to the heart of humanity's challenge in a galaxy full of unknown civilizations. Dr. Tanaka, the answer lies in understanding the difference between strength and aggression. When we first met the Kethvar, we were so eager to appear peaceful that we appeared weak. We can be open to cooperation without being vulnerable to exploitation. She changed the holographic display to show the final negotiations that had ended the Kethvar War. The human delegation was smaller this time, but their posture radiated confidence rather than desperation. They made offers from a position of strength, backed by a fleet that had proven its ability to defend human interests. These negotiations succeeded because the Kethvar finally understood what they were dealing with, Sarah explained. They realized that humans could be valuable allies or dangerous enemies, and that the choice between those outcomes was entirely up to them. That's the message we need to send to any new species we encounter. The training intensified over the following week. Sarah put the specialists through scenario after scenario, each designed to challenge their assumptions about alien behavior. They practiced communicating with hypothetical species that thought in mathematical concepts, species that communicated through chemical signals, and species that might not have individual consciousness, as humans understood it. The breakthrough came during a particularly challenging exercise. Dr. Harper was attempting to decode a simulated first contact message from an alien species that communicated through color patterns rather than sound or visual symbols. After hours of frustration, she suddenly understood the key insight that Sarah had been trying to teach them. It's not about translating their language into ours, Dr. Harper announced. It's about understanding the logical framework that makes their language possible in the first place. Now you're thinking like a xenolinguist, Sarah replied with satisfaction. When you encounter the real signals from Vega, don't try to force them into human communication patterns. Look for the underlying intelligence that shapes how they express ideas. Commander Morrison was working through tactical scenarios, analyzing potential first contact situations from a military perspective. Professor Chen, what if these aliens are more advanced than the Kethvar? What if they have technology we can't match? Sarah's expression grew serious. Then we rely on the same advantage that won us the war against the Kethvar. We adapt faster than they do. We're willing to take risks they won't consider, and we never ever give up defending what matters to us. The final day of training focused on practical protocols for the actual first contact situation. The specialists would return to Earth with detailed procedures for analyzing alien signals. strategies for opening communication, and contingency plans for various scenarios ranging from peaceful trade to active hostility. As the team prepared to leave Mars, Dr. Tanaka approached Sarah with a final question. Professor Chen, do you really think we're ready for this? The responsibility feels overwhelming. Sarah looked at the brilliant woman who had spent years studying alien biology and psychology. Dr. Tanaka, 8 years ago, humanity was facing extinction at the hands of a superior alien civilization. We were outnumbered, outgunned, and completely unprepared for interstellar warfare. But we survived because we refused to accept defeat. You're not just ready for this challenge. You're the product of humanity's greatest trial, and you represent everything we learned from that experience. That evening, as the government shuttle carried the specialists back to Earth, Sarah stood in her office watching the transport disappear into the Martian sky. In a few weeks, those 12 people would be responsible for humanity's first contact with an unknown alien species. The decisions they made could determine whether the next chapter of human history would be written in cooperation or conflict, but Sarah's real responsibility lay with the students who would carry that burden for the rest of their lives. Tomorrow, she would return to her classroom and continue preparing the next generation of human leaders for a galaxy that would test them in ways no one could predict. The war had taught her that victory wasn't about having all the answers. Victory was about having the courage to face the unknown and the wisdom to learn from whatever the universe revealed. The signal from the Vega system changed everything overnight. What had been theoretical exercises in Sarah's classroom suddenly became urgent practical training as news of the approaching alien vessel spread throughout human space. The Mars Colonial Academy found itself at the center of humanity's preparation efforts, with government officials, military commanders, and academic experts arriving daily to consult with Sarah and her students. Elena Vasquez was the first to grasp the full implications of their situation. During a morning briefing on the latest signal analysis, she raised her hand with a question that cut straight to the heart of humanity's dilemma. Professor Chen, what if we're approaching this backwards? Everyone's focused on understanding these aliens, but what if the real challenge is helping them understand us? Sarah paused in her explanation of the complex mathematical patterns that had been detected in the alien transmissions. Elena's question revealed a level of strategic thinking that impressed even the government specialists who had been attending her classes. Explain your reasoning. Elena, Sarah said, genuinely curious about her student's perspective. Well, we're assuming that they're trying to communicate with us because they want something from us. But what if they're trying to decide whether we're worth communicating with at all? What if this isn't first contact but a test? The room fell silent as the implications of Elena's words sank in. Marcus Thompson picked up the thread of reasoning, his engineering background helping him think through the logical possibilities. If they're advanced enough to travel between star systems, Marcus said slowly, then they probably have sensors that can analyze our technology, our communications, maybe even our biology from a distance. They might already know more about us than we know about them. Dr. Harper, who had remained on Mars to continue her signal analysis work, looked troubled by this possibility. That would change everything about our approach to first contact. Instead of trying to prove we're intelligent, we might need to prove we're worthy of their attention. Sarah felt a familiar sensation, the same tactical awareness that had kept her alive during the war. The students were seeing patterns that the experts had missed, asking questions that revealed dangerous assumptions in humanity's planning. Let's explore this hypothesis, Sarah said, moving to the holographic display. If these aliens are retesting us rather than simply communicating, what might they be looking for? David Kim raised his hand tentatively. Strength? The Kethavar tested us through combat, but maybe these aliens are testing us in a different way. Intelligence, suggested another student. The mathematical patterns in their signals might be puzzles designed to see how quickly we can solve them. Elena shook her head. I think it's something deeper than that. They're probably not the first species to discover us. There might be protocols for how advanced civilizations handle contact with younger races. The discussion that followed was unlike anything Sarah had experienced in her academic career. Her students were conducting original research in real time, developing insights that could shape humanity's response to the most important event in its history. Government officials who had come to observe were instead taking notes. recognizing that these young people were thinking about the problem in ways that established experts hadn't considered. The breakthrough came 3 days later, when the alien signal suddenly changed pattern. Instead of the complex mathematical progressions that had been repeating for weeks, the transmissions now contained what appeared to be historical data about human civilization. Population figures, energy consumption patterns, and technological development timelines were being broadcast back toward Earth with perfect accuracy. "They've been watching us," Marcus said grimly as the team analyzed the new data. "Not just since they sent the first signals, but for years, maybe decades." Dr. Harper was pale as she reviewed the implications. Some of this information could only have been gathered by monitoring our communications networks and analyzing our industrial output. "They know everything about our development since the end of the war." Sarah felt pieces clicking into place in her mind, patterns of behavior that reminded her of her own species' approach to unknown threats. "They're not testing our intelligence or our technology. They're testing our character." She called up historical data from the HFY conflict, displaying humanity's response to various crises during the 8-year war. "Look at these patterns. Every time humanity faced a seemingly impossible challenge, we found a way to adapt and overcome. We turned defeat into victory through determination and creative thinking." Elena was nodding as she followed Sarah's reasoning. "So they're watching to see how we handle the stress of first contact. Are we panicking? Are we preparing for war? Are we trying to hide, or are we facing the unknown with confidence?" "Exactly," Sarah replied. "And that means our response in the next few weeks will determine not just whether we establish peaceful relations, but whether they consider us mature enough for contact at all." The realization transformed the Academy's approach to the crisis. Instead of frantically trying to decode alien intentions, Sarah's team began developing strategies for demonstrating human resilience and adaptability. They created public information campaigns that showed humanity responding to the alien contact with curiosity, rather than fear, scientific programs that highlighted human ingenuity and creativity, and cultural exchanges that demonstrated the diversity and richness of human civilization. Marcus Thompson proposed the most ambitious project, a joint human HFY research initiative that would analyze the incoming alien signals together. "If these aliens are testing our maturity," Marcus argued, "then showing that we've learned to cooperate with former enemies might be exactly the kind of behavior they're looking for." The proposal was controversial, requiring delicate negotiations with HFY representatives who were still adjusting to their new relationship with humanity. But Sarah recognized the strategic brilliance of her students' idea. Cooperation with former enemies would demonstrate that humans could learn from conflict rather than being destroyed by it. The project became reality within a week, with human and HFY scientists working side by side to analyze the alien transmissions. The sight of former enemies collaborating on humanity's greatest challenge sent a powerful message to anyone watching from the Vega system. As the alien vessel continued its approach toward human space, Sarah realized that her students had accomplished something remarkable. They had taken the lessons of the war and transformed them into tools for peace, proving that humanity's greatest strength wasn't its military power, but its ability to grow and adapt in the face of new challenges. Elena Vasquez summarized their achievement during a late-night planning session. "We're not the same species that stumbled into war with the HFY 8 years ago. We've learned to think beyond our own assumptions, to cooperate across species lines, and to face the unknown with confidence rather than fear." Sarah looked at her students and saw the future of human civilization. They had grown up during humanity's darkest hour, but instead of being broken by that experience, they had been forged into something stronger. Whatever challenges awaited humanity among the stars, these young people would be ready to face them. The first face-to-face meeting between humans and the Zalari took place 6 months after their vessel had entered the outer edge of the Sol system. Sarah watched the historic event from the observation deck of the Mars Colonial Academy, surrounded by her students who had helped prepare humanity for this moment. The meeting was being broadcast across human space, marking the beginning of a new era in galactic civilization. Ambassador Chen Wei, no relation to Sarah despite sharing a surname, stood in the center of the specially constructed contact facility on Luna's surface. Across from him stood something that challenged every assumption about what intelligent life might look like. The Zolari representative was nearly 10 feet tall, with crystalline structures covering most of its body and appendages that seemed to shift between solid and energy states, depending on its emotional condition. "The patterns are exactly what Elena predicted," whispered Marcus Thompson, referring to the communication protocols that Sarah's students had developed months earlier. The Zolari was speaking through a combination of harmonic vibrations and controlled electromagnetic pulses, a method of communication that no human linguist had anticipated but that Elena's theoretical framework had made possible to decode. Sarah felt a surge of pride as she watched her former students' work being vindicated on the galactic stage. Elena Vasquez was now part of the official contact team, her insights about alien testing protocols having proven crucial to humanity's successful first contact. David Kim had joined the technical analysis group that had finally cracked the mathematical patterns in the Zolari signals. Marcus Thompson was working with the engineering teams that were adapting human technology to interface with Zolari communication systems. But the real validation of Sarah's teaching methods came in the content of the first official exchange between the species. Ambassador Chen was not pleading for acceptance or attempting to prove humanity's worthiness. Instead, he was negotiating from a position of strength, offering cooperation while making it clear that humanity would defend its interests if necessary. "We welcome contact with the Zolari Collective," the ambassador stated clearly. "Humanity has learned much about interstellar civilization through our relationship with the Kethvar, and we believe that cooperation benefits all species. However, we want to establish clear boundaries and mutual respect from the beginning of our relationship." The Zolari representatives' crystalline structures shifted to a blue-green pattern that Elena's team had identified as indicating approval and interest. Through its complex harmonic communication, it replied with concepts that took several minutes for the human translation systems to process. "The collective acknowledges humanity's demonstrated capacity for growth and adaptation," came the translated response. "Your species has shown the ability to learn from conflict without being consumed by it. This is a rare quality among young civilizations." Sarah felt a chill as the full implications of the Zolari's words became clear. Humanity had indeed been tested just as Elena had theorized. But the test hadn't been about intelligence or technology. It had been about character, about the ability to evolve beyond the mistakes that had led to the Kethvar War. Dr. Webb, who had been standing beside Sarah throughout the broadcast, spoke quietly. "They've been watching us for longer than we thought, haven't they?" "Probably since before the war," Sarah replied. "They wanted to see how we would handle our first contact with a hostile alien species. Would we be destroyed by the experience, or would we learn from it?" The conversation between Ambassador Chen and the Zolari representative continued for 3 hours, covering topics ranging from trade protocols to territorial boundaries to scientific cooperation. What impressed Sarah most was the ambassador's confidence and competence. He was drawing on lessons learned from the Kethvar experience, avoiding the mistakes that had led to conflict while remaining true to human values and interests. Elena Vasquez appeared on the communication screen, providing real-time analysis of the Zolari's communication patterns for the negotiating team. Her ability to read alien intentions and emotional states had become legendary among the contact specialists, and watching her work reminded Sarah of the scared young woman who had entered her classroom nearly a year ago, seeking to understand why her parents had died. "The Zolari are impressed by our military cooperation with the Kethvar," Elena reported to the ambassador. "They interpret it as a sign of mature civilization, that we can form alliances with former enemies based on mutual benefit rather than dominance." The joint human Kethvar research project that Marcus had proposed had indeed become a crucial factor in establishing humanity's credibility with the Zolari. The sight of former enemies working together on scientific challenges had apparently convinced the aliens that humans were capable of the kind of long-term thinking necessary for galactic civilization. As the formal first contact session concluded, the Zolari representative made an announcement that stunned everyone involved. "The collective extends an invitation to humanity to join the Galactic Communications Network. Your species has demonstrated the qualities necessary for participation in interstellar civilization." Sarah's students erupted in celebration, but she remained focused on the screen as Elena translated the full implications of the offer. The Galactic Communications Network was apparently a loose confederation of advanced species that shared information and coordinated responses to galactic threats. Membership would give humanity access to technologies and knowledge that could advance their civilization by centuries. There are responsibilities that come with membership, the Zalari continued. Human space will serve as a testing ground for other young species seeking contact with galactic civilization. Your experiences with both conflict and cooperation make you ideal mentors for civilizations facing their first interstellar challenges. The irony was not lost on Sarah. Humanity, barely 8 years removed from its own disastrous first contact experience, was being asked to help other species avoid the same mistakes. The students who had grown up during the war would become the teachers for the next generation of galactic civilizations. Over the following weeks, as the formal treaties were negotiated and the first exchanges of technology and knowledge began, Sarah realized that her work at the academy had been more important than she had ever imagined. The young people she had taught were not just students anymore. They were the foundation of humanity's new role in galactic civilization. Elena Vasquez became humanity's first xenopsychology specialist, developing protocols for analyzing and communicating with species that might be even more alien than the Kethvar or Zalari. Marcus Thompson joined the engineering team that was adapting human technology to work with Zalari systems, creating hybrid technologies that neither species could have developed alone. David Kim became part of the cultural exchange program that would introduce human art, literature, and philosophy to the galactic community. 6 months after first contact, Sarah received a message from Elena that brought tears to her eyes. Professor Chen, we just received our first request for help. There's a young civilization in the Arcturus system that has detected artificial signals from an unknown species. They're asking for human advisors to help them prepare for first contact. I wanted you to know that everything you taught us is being put to use exactly as you intended. Standing in her office on Mars, looking out at the red landscape that had become humanity's launching pad to the stars, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her from the battlefields of the Kethvar War to the classrooms of the Academy. She had survived humanity's greatest military challenge, only to discover that the classroom was where the real battle for the future was being fought. Her students were now scattered across human space and beyond, carrying the lessons they had learned to new worlds and new challenges. They understood that humanity's strength came not from superior weapons or technology, but from their willingness to adapt, learn, and grow in the face of any challenge the universe might present. The war had ended, but Sarah's mission was complete. She had forged a generation of leaders who would carry humanity's values to the stars, while remaining open to the infinite possibilities that the galaxy offered. Whatever challenges awaited humanity among the stars, they would face them with the knowledge that they had already survived their darkest hour and emerged stronger than before.